Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. It is finally November, and as we all know, and as I've said multiple times before, November is when college football is at its best. It's when college football is the most exciting and when anything is possible. And Week 10 brings us some of the biggest games of the entire year, including two games that will determine who meets up in the SEC championship game. So as always, we have put up our 5 biggest games of Week 10, and we're not going to delay it any further. We're going to kick things off breaking down number 6 Georgia at number 9 Kentucky for basically the SEC East championship game. Kentucky having already beaten Florida back in Week 2, Georgia taking care of Florida just this past week. The winner of this game is going to win the SEC East Division, which means they're going to probably more than likely face off against the winner of this Alabama-LSU game, which we'll touch on here in a second. But this game extremely intriguing, and I like this because it's just different. We saw Georgia happen last year, how they just ran the table, made it all the way to the college football playoff, made it all the way to the national championship game before ultimately falling to Alabama. But Kentucky's a little bit different, always known as being a basketball powerhouse, number 9 in the initial rankings, or in the first rankings of the college football playoff committee. And Mark Stoops has done a phenomenal job bringing them up and making them relevant both in the SEC and on the national stage once again. The key in this game, though, is going to be how well does Terry Wilson play at quarterback for Kentucky. If you watched him play against Missouri this past week, a game that ended it very controversially, a game that a lot of people, including myself, kind of thought that it was not a pass interference call or wasn't a holding call. I believe it was in the end zone that gave Kentucky that one untimed down and the chance to beat Missouri as time excited with no time left on the clock. However, the Wildcats did get the win, and Terry Wilson threw for, I believe, over 250 yards, which was the most he had thrown this season. Just 2 weeks prior against Vanderbilt in a defensive slugfest, they only won 14-7. He threw for less than 50 yards. So which Terry Wilson is going to show up? We know Benny Snell is capable of leading this Wildcats team, but going up against a solid Georgia defense, I don't know. I think you're going to have to rely on the pass a little bit. So if Terry Wilson plays like he did against Missouri, they have a shot at winning this game. If they shut down the pass and Kentucky has to utilize Benny Snell a lot more, I think Georgia's going to run away with this one. So a lot of people are banking on Georgia taking care of business. I think they're a 9-point favorite to open up. This game is extremely intriguing. It's going to be close, but I think Georgia's going to go in there and get the win. I think the Bulldogs are just going to be too much for Kentucky, but I'm very excited to see just the crowd and the environment that the Wildcats are going to bring, the Big Blue Nation are going to bring in for this game. And if Kentucky somehow snags the upset here, they could easily propel into the top 5. And we're not just going to be talking about SEC title for the Wildcats. We're going to be talking about college football playoff for Kentucky, which is really crazy to say. But right now, though, I'm going to stick with the Bulldogs in what will be a very exciting SEC East championship game. And then number 13, West Virginia at number 17, Texas. This game, big for both schools. Bigger, in my opinion, for West Virginia. Both of these schools are still available, are still eligible for the Big 12 championship game. They still have their eyes set on getting there and more than likely facing off against Oklahoma. But West Virginia only has 1 loss, and 13th is a decent position to still have time to move up and maybe try to get into that top 4. I don't think it's going to happen, but they're still in a solid spot. If you remember, when the first playoff rankings came out in 2014, Ohio State, who won the national championship, was number 16 to start things off. So it is possible. Texas, though, coming off a crushing blow to Oklahoma State, a game that I did predict correctly, one that I did think the Cowboys would win. Texas being ranked number 6 at the time in the AP poll. Losing that game to the Cowboys, will they be able to bounce back against the Mountaineers? Their defense absolutely looked atrocious against Oklahoma State. Allowed 38 points. It was a shootout, but allowed 38 points against an Oklahoma State team that was struggling against the likes of Iowa State and Kansas State, guys like that. So will Will Grier go in there and just pick apart this Texas defense, or will Tom Herman have the ship turned around and Texas is still going to maybe go in there and win this game and still have their eyes set on that Big 12 championship game? Because the loser of this is out, in my opinion. The loser of this is not going to be in contention for the Big 12 championship game anymore. Texas is out of the college football playoff race because of those 2 losses to Maryland and Oklahoma State. West Virginia is still alive for both Big 12 and maybe the college football playoff. It's a bigger game for the Mountaineers, but I think Texas turn things around. They know that their season's not over yet. They still have a lot left to play for, and I think with it being at home, they get a solid win over a good West Virginia team led by Will Grier, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. Number 14, Penn State at number 5, Michigan. Another huge game. Once again, bigger for Michigan than it is for Penn State. A lot of these games, you know, some of these teams can play spoiler or just going up against their rival. They want to ruin someone else's season. And Penn State still technically has a shot at the Big Ten championship game, without a doubt. They're in a tough division, though, obviously with Ohio State and then Michigan. This game being played at the Big House, in my mind, there is no doubt that Michigan is going to win this game. It's going to be close, but Penn State has not looked like the Penn State of old. They struggled against Iowa at home. They've struggled at Happy Valley, period. Losing to Ohio State, losing to Michigan State, and then narrowly beating Iowa, a game that they were down, I think, 12-0 in at one point, allowing 2 safeties. Michigan, though, a team that I've repeatedly said has quietly kind of crept up, haven't lost since that Notre Dame season opener, Notre Dame being number 4 in the country right now. This is a Michigan team that, to me, is different under Jim Harbaugh. Looks very, very different. I think they get a huge win over the Nittany Lions because they know what they're playing for, and it's going to set up a huge showdown against Ohio State in the season finale. I assume neither of them lose between now and the season finale there. But I do think Michigan's going to get the win here at home. Penn State, to me, is 14th. That's a very respectable ranking, but I don't think they're going to make the Big Ten championship. They're obviously out of the playoff race. This is just not, to me, a Penn State team that's looking as good as we thought they were going to be. Number 4, Notre Dame at Northwestern. Why is this game up here compared to some of the other games that could be thrown up here? This week has a handful of games that could be sneaky good. You got Stanford, Washington, which would certainly be up here if neither of those two teams have been major disappointments for this season. Now we're relying on Washington State to potentially represent the Pac-12 in the playoff, and they could at number 8 in the initial rankings. But that could be up here. Chip Kelly's making his return to Oregon. UCLA facing off against the Ducks, so he's making his return to Autzen Stadium. That's going to be a fun one to watch. So there's just a handful of games this week. Oklahoma and Texas Tech. One that I could almost put up here but decided to hold off on, but a potential upset there with the Red Raiders going up against a very high-flying Sooners offense. Expect that one to be a shootout. But I put Notre Dame and Northwestern up here because this is a game that really, in my opinion, could throw the whole playoff into a loop because Northwestern is peaking at the right time. I think they started off 1-3. Now they're, what, 5-3, 4-3, somewhere around there? They are peaking at the right time, going on a run. Even if Northwestern loses this game, it's okay in terms of their Big Ten title hopes because it's not a conference game. It's not a big deal. But it's a huge deal for Notre Dame, obviously, because they're an independent team. They lose this game, they're out. Notre Dame has to go undefeated if they want to make the college football playoff. They can't lose on the road to an unranked Northwestern team. That's not going to be a quality loss in the eyes of the committee, despite how well Northwestern's been playing over the past couple of weeks. So this game, I feel like, could be a major trap game for the Fighting Irish, but in the end, I think Notre Dame's going to be able to go on the road and get the job done. I love, love, love the switch at quarterback back to Ian Book. I was high on Brandon Wimbush to start the season after watching him play. Obviously, it was time for a change. Brian Kelly made the right choice. This Notre Dame team is different. I've used that word a lot for a lot of teams, but I mean it with this Notre Dame team. They're different from what we've seen in the past under these Brian Kelly Fighting Irish teams. I think they go on the road, get a huge win over the Wildcats. Doesn't ruin their Big Ten title chances because it's not a conference game. It just adds an extra loss to their record. Number 1, Alabama. Number 3, LSU. By far the biggest game of the entire day, the entire Saturday, the entire week, maybe even the biggest game of the entire year until the national championship game, of course. A couple years ago, was it 2011, 2010, we had the game of the century, number 1 Alabama going up, or number 1 LSU, I should say, going up against number 2 Alabama. The Tigers winning that game in Tuscaloosa 9-6 in overtime. And this game, once again, could be a very defensive battle game, a very low-scoring game. Alabama, though, opening up as 15-point favorites. And some of the people, including myself a little bit, think that might be a little high. We cannot underestimate the power of Death Valley. You just can't do that. Now, I know you can go look at the stats, and they put one out there when LSU faced off against Georgia a couple weeks ago, saying that they were, I think, was it 2-13 against top 2 teams or top 3 teams at home over the past couple of years, so obviously not a good record at all. But a night game in Death Valley going up against Alabama in a game, in a series over the past decade or so that has usually been extremely competitive, this has the opportunity to really screw everything up, to screw the playoff race up, to screw the SEC East, SEC West race up, and obviously this is the SEC West championship game right here because I don't think LSU or Alabama will lose a game after this point. I think they will both win out. Whoever wins this game will win out. LSU in a tougher position, in my opinion, than Alabama because they've already lost a game. They've already lost to Florida, and that's a quality loss, without a doubt. But if LSU is going to lose this game, they're done. They're out of the SEC West race, and they're probably out of the playoff race. If they play them close, LSU might drop from 3rd to 6th, 3rd to 7th. But could we see a 2-loss SEC team get in there? We'd have to wait and find out. But Alabama, this is by far their toughest test, going on the road in a tough environment against a very, very solid LSU defense that, yes, will be without Devin White for the first half. And I hate to say that because he doesn't deserve to be. But LSU fans can't use that as an excuse for anything. You can't use that as an excuse for why you might lose or why you might struggle in the first half. One player does not make up your entire defense. Nonetheless, this is Tua Tagovailoa's toughest test yet, Alabama's toughest test yet. Tagovailoa has yet to throw an interception, has yet to play in the 4th quarter. Will any of those two things change this Saturday, and I think it will. I think this game will go all the way until the fourth quarter. LSU's going to give them a fight, and Orgeron's going to have his Tigers team ready, but in the end, Nick Saban and the Tide will once again prevail, as they always do, and I think they're going to remain undefeated. That will send LSU their second straight loss, but when I do my spread picks this week, I'm going to be very, very tempted to take LSU in this one because 15 points to me seems a little too high in a game that I think will be very close and very defensive, a very strong defensive battle. So this is going to be one heck of a game. Make sure you stay tuned for this one. I believe 7 o'clock on CBS, the biggest game of the night, potentially the year. So our Heisman race, as always, we said we were going to rank these guys. We're going to continue to do this for the rest of the year, and I've said repeatedly it's the year of the quarterback. So, you know, we don't have to go too much into it because we know right now the front runner. That's Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama. If his stats are anything like it's been all season against LSU, if he plays like he's done all season against LSU, I think you just go ahead and lock him in unless something wild happens, like an injury or something like that. If he goes in there and just torches this strong LSU defense, hand him the Heisman now. But if he struggles, you could see a guy like Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins even try to make their way up and make that race a little bit closer. But as I've always said, one game, one bad performance does not take away someone's Heisman chances. At least it shouldn't. And that might not be the case for Tua Tagovailoa. Number 2, we've got Kyler Murray. This past week against Kansas State, he had 4 total touchdowns, over 350 yards through the air, 3 touchdowns, and 1 touchdown on the ground. I put him above Dwayne Haskins, obviously, because Ohio State didn't play this past weekend. And I really think, after watching both these guys play, I feel like Kyler Murray just might be the better option, just better quarterback overall than Haskins. Dwayne Haskins is putting up, 400, 450 yards a game through the air, and that's extremely impressive. But are they getting the wins? Yes, except they didn't do that against Purdue. But I think Kyler Murray is more dangerous on his feet, dual threat, than Dwayne Haskins, and that's why I have him moving up from the 3rd spot to the 2 spot right now. Maybe those will flip again after this week. We'll have to wait and find out. Dwayne Haskins has an opportunity to have a big stat pattern against a very weak Nebraska team. So we're going to make sure to watch this. But Kyler Murray, number 2 right now, only 5 incompletions against Kansas State. That's extremely, extremely impressive. So I think he right now is the toughest competition to Tagovailoa. Number 3, like I said, Dwayne Haskins has the opportunity for a stat pattern against a Nebraska team that has extremely struggled lately. And I think they get that game at home. I think the game at Ohio State. So Haskins should be able to bounce back after the bye week, after a crushing blow to Purdue, and put up once again some big-time numbers. And then Will Grier just this past week against Baylor. Yes, it was his Baylor, but he put up over 350 yards once again and 3 more touchdowns. I've had criticism for saying, why is Will Grier still on the Heisman watch? Why don't you put someone like Ian Book, Trace McSorley, maybe even make a case for Gardner Minshew at Washington State? He's putting up some big-time stats with the Cougars, so you can make a case for him. But I've got him here because of his bounce back against Baylor, despite how weak Baylor might be in some of your eyes. He put up some good numbers. 1 game, maybe not even 2 games, can take away someone's Heisman chances. He had bad performance against Iowa State, bad performance against Kansas, but if he continues to do so and puts up some big numbers against a ranked Texas team on the road, he certainly deserves to be in this top 4. If he struggles, he will be taken out. So these are our top 4 quarterbacks right now, our top 4 Heisman contenders going into Week 10. And like I said, these guys only have a couple more weeks to make an impression on the committees before the Heisman is given out in December. So we're definitely going to keep our eye on that. November is here. Week 10 is going to be wild. It's going to be super exciting. We unfortunately did not get to do a college football playoff rankings analysis. We will be doing that next week. I know the first one's pretty important, but we'll be doing that in the next week. And I guarantee there will be some major shakeups after Week 10. So around next Tuesday, next Wednesday, we'll have our first playoff ranking analysis. So make sure you're checking back for that, checking back for live streams and updates as always. On Twitter, check us out for our spread picks over there at Gridiron Expert and our takes as games are going on live all day Saturday, and always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on the Gridiron Expert.